Ambassador Zethrak's 4 eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at the holographic message floating before him. The human diplomat's words echoed in his mind like a death sentence. The Terran Federation hereby formally withdraws from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The massive council chamber, which normally buzzed with the chatter of hundreds of species, fell into an eerie silence. Representatives from across the galaxy sat frozen in their seats, their various forms of communication organs hanging open in shock. The Arcturian delegation's crystalline bodies flickered with nervous energy, while the gaseous nebulans swirled anxiously in their containment suits. "This cannot be happening," whispered Council Prime Vortak, his scaled hands trembling as they gripped the edge of his podium. The ancient Draknari had served as the Council's leader for over 3 centuries, and never in his long life had he witnessed such a catastrophic diplomatic breakdown. Zethrak replayed the message again, hoping he had misunderstood something. But there it was, clear as the twin suns of his homeworld. Ambassador Sarah Chen, the human representative who had served faithfully for 15 years, stood rigid in her blue diplomatic uniform. Her brown eyes, usually warm and welcoming, were now cold as the void of space. "The Galactic Council has repeatedly ignored humanity's warnings about the growing threat of the Shadow Fleet," she continued in the recording. "Your refusal to take decisive action has left us no choice but to pursue our own path to galactic security. Humanity will no longer be bound by the Council's restrictions or protocols." The message flickered and disappeared, leaving behind a deafening silence that seemed to press down on every being in the chamber. Zethrak's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the implications. Humanity, the species that had joined the galactic community only 200 years ago, was abandoning the very institution that had welcomed them with open arms. "But they're just one species among thousands," stammered Representative Quillix, his tentacles writhing nervously. "Surely they cannot believe they can stand alone against the challenges that face our galaxy." Council Prime Vortak's expression darkened. He had lived long enough to remember the days before humanity's arrival, when the galaxy was a much more predictable place. The humans had brought with them an unusual combination of traits that had both fascinated and troubled the Council. They were innovative beyond measure, adapting and improving upon technologies that other species had considered perfected for millennia. Yet they were also stubborn, refusing to accept the established order that had maintained peace for thousands of years. "Initiate emergency protocols," Vortak commanded, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. "I want a full analysis of humanity's military capabilities, their trade networks, and their technological assets. We need to understand what we're dealing with." As aides and analysts scattered to fulfill his orders, Zethrak couldn't shake the feeling that they were all missing something crucial. He had worked closely with the humans during his tenure as the Kepler system's representative. He had watched them solve problems that had stumped other species for generations, often using methods that seemed chaotic and reckless, but somehow achieved remarkable results. The humans called it thinking outside the box, a phrase that had puzzled translators for years. Most galactic species approached problems through established protocols and time-tested procedures. Humans, however, seemed to delight in finding completely new ways to approach old problems, often combining seemingly unrelated concepts to create unexpected solutions. 3 hours later, the Emergency Council session reconvened. The atmosphere in the chamber had shifted from shock to concern, and now to something approaching panic. The intelligence reports painted a picture that none of them had anticipated. "Ladies, gentlemen, and other honored beings," announced Chief Analyst Mordek, his usually steady voice wavering slightly. "Our investigation has revealed some disturbing facts about humanity's true capabilities." The main display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of star systems glowed in various colors, representing different species and their territories. The human systems, marked in blue, seemed relatively small and insignificant compared to the vast empires of the older species. "This is what we believe to be the extent of human influence," Mordek continued. "However, our deeper analysis has uncovered a different reality." The display shifted, and suddenly hundreds of additional systems began glowing with a soft blue light. Trade routes appeared as flowing lines, connecting human space to almost every corner of the galaxy. Manufacturing nodes, research stations, and communication relays revealed themselves in a vast network that none of the council members had fully comprehended. "By the Great Void," gasped Representative Thymel, her insect-like compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. "They've been quietly building connections everywhere." Mordek nodded grimly. "In the past 50 years, humanity has become the primary supplier of advanced computer systems to over 60% of galactic civilization. Their artificial intelligence networks process everything from asteroid mining operations to interstellar shipping logistics. Their medical technology has become standard equipment in hospitals across the galaxy." The implications hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. Zethrak felt his stomach drop as he realized what this meant. Humanity hadn't just joined galactic civilization, they had quietly made themselves indispensable to it. "Furthermore," Mordek continued, his voice growing even more grave, "our military intelligence division has discovered that human merchant vessels are far more sophisticated than we initially understood. Many appear to be capable of rapid military conversion, and their defensive systems are significantly more advanced than our regulations typically permit." Council Prime Vortak leaned forward, his ancient mind working through the ramifications. "Are you telling me that humanity has been preparing for this moment for decades?" "It appears so, Prime Vortak. Their industrial capacity has been deliberately distributed and hardened against disruption. Their research and development programs have been pursuing technologies that seemed academically interesting but militarily irrelevant. Now we're beginning to understand that these seemingly harmless innovations could have significant strategic applications." The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as representatives from various species began to grasp the scope of the situation. The Altarians, known for their expertise in trade and logistics, were quickly calculating the economic impact of losing human technology and services. The militant Krogan delegation was reassessing humanity's military potential, while the pacifist Etherians wondered if diplomatic solutions were still possible. "What about the Shadow Fleet threat?" asked Representative Zelos, his crystalline form resonating with worry. "The humans cited our inaction as their reason for leaving. Perhaps if we address their concerns—" Vortak's expression darkened further. The Shadow Fleet had indeed been a growing concern for the past decade. These mysterious vessels had been appearing on the edges of civilized space, attacking isolated colonies and shipping lanes before disappearing back into the void. The attacks followed no discernible pattern, and no species had claimed responsibility. The Council's response had been frustratingly slow and bureaucratic. Committees had been formed to study the threat. Subcommittees had been created to analyze the committee's findings. Proposals for action had been debated, amended, delayed, and debated again. Meanwhile, the attacks had continued, growing bolder and more frequent. The humans submitted 17 different proposals for coordinated action against the Shadow Fleet, Vortak admitted reluctantly. Each proposal was subjected to standard review procedures. The earliest submissions are still working their way through the approval process. "How long ago was the first proposal submitted?" asked Zethrak, though he suspected he already knew the answer. 4 years, 7 months, and 12 days, Mordek replied after consulting his datapad. The silence that followed was perhaps the most uncomfortable in the Council's long history. Every representative in the chamber understood the implications. While they had been following proper procedures and protocols, people had been dying. Entire colonies had been wiped out while they debated the proper jurisdiction for mounting a response. "Sir," interrupted a young aide, rushing up to Vortak's podium with obvious urgency. "We're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human facilities are going dark. Communication networks are being severed. Their merchant fleet is withdrawing from established trade routes." "How is this possible?" demanded Representative Kravak, his warrior species instincts making him pace aggressively. "They couldn't have coordinated such a massive operation without us detecting the communications." The aide looked even more nervous. "Sir, it appears they weren't using standard galactic communication networks for coordination. Intelligence believes they've been using quantum-entangled communication systems that operate outside our monitoring capabilities." Zethrak felt a chill run through his body. Quantum entanglement communication was theoretical for most species, requiring resources and technical expertise that made it impractical for widespread use. The fact that humanity had not only perfected the technology, but deployed it on a galactic scale without anyone noticing was deeply unsettling. "What do our long-range sensors show about human military movements?" Vortak asked, though his tone suggested he was dreading the answer. "That's the problem, sir," the aide replied. "We're not detecting any unusual military activity in human space. Their defense fleets appear to be maintaining normal patrol patterns. There are no signs of mobilization or preparation for conflict." "Then how are they implementing this withdrawal so efficiently?" "We believe they've been planning this for years, sir. Every action appears to have been predetermined and automated. They're not scrambling to implement an emergency plan. They're executing a carefully orchestrated strategy." The full weight of humanity's departure was beginning to settle on the assembled representatives. This wasn't an emotional outburst or a hasty decision made in anger. The humans had methodically prepared for this moment, building redundant systems and alternative networks that would allow them to function independently of galactic civilization. "Prime Vortak," said Representative Thymel, her voice carrying a note of desperation. "We must consider the possibility that humanity knows something we don't. Their intelligence networks have always been remarkably efficient. What if their warnings about the Shadow Fleet were more urgent than we realized?" Before Vortak could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Emergency lights bathed everything in a harsh red glow as automated systems activated crisis protocols. The massive display screen flickered to life, showing incoming priority transmissions from across the galaxy. "Council Prime," announced the chamber's AI system. "We are receiving distress calls from 17 different sectors. Multiple colonies are reporting massive Shadow Fleet attacks. The scale and coordination of these assaults far exceeds any previous encounters." Zethrak watched in horror as reports flooded in from across civilized space. The Shadow Fleet, which had previously struck in small, isolated attacks, was now launching simultaneous assaults on dozens of targets. Their vessels, previously seen only in groups of 3 or 4, were now appearing in massive formations of hundreds. "Sir," called another aide, "we're also receiving a message from the human ambassador. It was transmitted just moments before the attacks began." "Put it through," Vortak ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Ambassador Chen appeared once again on the main display, but this time her expression was one of grim satisfaction rather than diplomatic formality. Behind her, Zethrak could see what appeared to be a military command center with humans in uniform working at advanced tactical displays. "Council Prime Vortak," she began. "By the time you receive this message, the true scope of the Shadow Fleet threat will have become apparent. For the past 6 months, humanity has been tracking a massive Shadow Fleet buildup in the void sectors beyond the galactic rim. Our intelligence indicates they were preparing for a coordinated assault on all major galactic powers simultaneously." The implications hit the Council like a meteor strike. While they had been debating procedures and protocols, humanity had been conducting their own investigation and discovering the true nature of the threat. We attempted to share this intelligence through Captain Elena Vasquez, stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Prometheus, watching as her tactical display updated with incoming reports from across the galaxy. The Shadow Fleet assault was unfolding exactly as their intelligence had predicted, with one crucial difference. Every human installation, every colony, every trade route was now operating under complete communications blackout from galactic networks. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Zhang from the communications station, "we're receiving the final confirmation signals from Operation Exodus. All human assets have successfully disconnected from Galactic Council infrastructure. Our independent networks are fully operational." Elena nodded, her expression grim but determined. Around her, the bridge crew worked with efficient precision, their movements reflecting years of preparation for this exact moment. Every person aboard had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission, the first phase of humanity's greatest gamble. "Status report on the Shadow Fleet assault?" she asked. 17 major population centers under attack, Captain. 43 shipping lanes compromised. The Altarian homeworld is reporting massive casualties, and the Draknari Military Command is requesting immediate assistance from all allied forces. Zhang paused, checking his display again. "They're specifically asking for human reinforcements." "Too late for that now," Elena replied quietly. The irony wasn't lost on her. For months, human military strategists had pleaded with the Galactic Council to allow preemptive strikes against Shadow Fleet staging areas. Every request had been denied, deemed too aggressive and potentially provocative. Now, with their worlds burning, the same species that had rejected human warnings were begging for human help. Admiral Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main view screen, transmitted from the new human command center hidden deep within the asteroid fields of the Sol system. The former ambassador had shed her diplomatic uniform for military dress, her transformation symbolizing humanity's complete break from galactic politics. "Captain Vasquez," Chen began, "you are authorized to begin Operation Revelation. All human fleets are to engage Shadow Fleet forces according to predetermined battle plans. Remember, we are no longer bound by Galactic Council rules of engagement." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The Galactic Council's military protocols were notoriously restrictive, designed to minimize casualties and preserve diplomatic options even during active conflicts. Human military doctrine, developed through centuries of warfare on Earth and refined through recent colonial conflicts, took a much more pragmatic approach to warfare. "Understood, Admiral. What about civilian evacuations?" "All human colonies have been implementing evacuation procedures for the past 3 months. Our people are as safe as we can make them. Priority 1 is stopping the Shadow Fleet before they can consolidate their gains." The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with the weight of command. Around her, the bridge crew continued their preparations. But she could sense the tension beneath their professional demeanor. They were about to reveal capabilities that humanity had kept hidden for decades, technologies that violated numerous galactic treaties and conventions. "Helm, set course for the Kepler system," Elena commanded. "Maximum acceleration." "Aye, Captain. Estimated arrival in 47 minutes. The Prometheus surged forward, its experimental fusion drives propelling the massive vessel at speeds that would have been impossible using standard galactic propulsion technology. Elena watched the stars streak past, each light representing worlds that might soon fall to the Shadow Fleet if humanity's gamble failed. Meanwhile, in the Kepler system, Ambassador Zethrak found himself trapped in a nightmare scenario. His homeworld's orbital defense platforms were struggling against a Shadow Fleet assault force of unprecedented size. The sleek black vessels moved with perfect coordination, their weapons tearing through traditional galactic shields as if they were made of paper. "Sir, called his aide. "Our defense grid is down to 30% effectiveness. The enemy vessels are using some kind of energy weapon that disrupts our shield matrices." Zethrak stared at the tactical display in horror. The Shadow Fleet ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. Their hulls seemed to absorb sensor scans, making accurate targeting nearly impossible. Their weapons fired beams of coruscating darkness that not only destroyed targets, but somehow drained energy from nearby vessels. "What about evacuation efforts?" he asked. "Proceeding slowly, sir. The civilian transport ships are having difficulty maintaining their systems near the enemy vessels. Several have already suffered complete power failures." A new contact appeared on the sensor display, approaching at impossible speed from the direction of human space. Zethrak's 4 eyes focused on the readings, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The signature was definitely human, but the velocity and energy output were far beyond anything in the galactic database. "Sir," the aide called out, his voice filled with surprise, "we're being hailed by a human vessel. They're requesting permission to assist with the defense." Zethrak hesitated for only a moment. Pride warred with pragmatism in his mind, but the sight of Shadow Fleet vessels closing on civilian evacuation ships made the choice clear. "Grant them permission. At this point, we need all the help we can get." The Prometheus dropped out of its impossible speed run directly between the Shadow Fleet assault force and the struggling Kepler defense platforms. Elena watched her tactical display as dozens of enemy vessels immediately shifted their attention to her ship, their dark weapons beginning to charge. "Captain," reported her weapons officer, "we have target locks on all enemy vessels. Quantum torpedo tubes are loaded and ready." "Fire at will," Elena commanded. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for generations. The Prometheus unleashed a barrage of weapons that shouldn't have existed according to galactic law. Quantum torpedoes, banned by the Treaty of Altair for their devastating power, streaked across space at near light speed. Particle beam arrays, restricted technology deemed too dangerous for widespread deployment, lanced out with pinpoint accuracy. But the most shocking revelation was the ship's defensive capabilities. As Shadow Fleet weapons struck the Prometheus, they encountered not traditional energy shields, but something far more advanced. The human vessel seemed to exist in a slightly different phase of reality, causing enemy attacks to pass harmlessly through empty space while the ship remained fully capable of offensive action. Within minutes, half the Shadow Fleet assault force had been reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and debris. The remaining enemy vessels, apparently recognizing they faced something beyond their understanding, began an organized retreat toward the edge of the system. "Captain," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kepler Defense Coordinator. They're requesting an explanation for our weapon systems." Elena smiled grimly. "Tell them we'll be happy to discuss it with the Galactic Council when this crisis is over. Until then, we have a galaxy to save." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as human fleets emerged from hidden positions to engage Shadow Fleet forces. The Arcturian homeworld, on the verge of falling to a massive assault, watched in amazement as human dreadnoughts materialized from what appeared to be empty space, their advanced stealth systems finally being revealed. At the Draknari military stronghold of Kareth Prime, a human strike force demonstrated the true capabilities of their merchant vessels. The seemingly peaceful cargo ships transformed in minutes into heavily armed cruisers, their modular construction allowing rapid reconfiguration for military purposes. Council Prime Vortax sat in his emergency command center, watching reports stream in from across the galaxy. Each update brought fresh revelations about human capabilities that violated dozens of galactic treaties. Quantum phase technology, restricted artificial intelligence, weapons of mass destruction, stealth systems far beyond anything previously imagined. "Sir," reported his intelligence chief, "we're also detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of human space. Long-range sensors suggest they're mobilizing their entire fleet. not just the vessels we've observed in combat. How is this possible? Vortak demanded. Our intelligence estimates indicated humanity possessed perhaps 200 major warships. These reports suggest they have thousands. Sir, it appears our intelligence was fundamentally flawed. Human industrial capacity has been vastly underestimated. They've been constructing vessels in hidden shipyards using resources we didn't know they controlled. Furthermore, their ships are constructed using modular technology that allows rapid assembly and deployment. Representative Thymel entered the command center, her usually calm demeanor shattered by the day's revelations. Prime Vortak, we've received a communication from Admiral Chen. She's requesting a private conference. Put her through, Vortak ordered. Admiral Chen appeared on the main display, but now she was standing in what was clearly the bridge of a massive warship. Behind her, Elena could see tactical displays showing the positions of hundreds of vessels, each one representing capabilities the Galactic Council had never imagined. Prime Vortak, Chen began. I believe current events have made it clear that the Shadow Fleet represents an existential threat to galactic civilization. My government is prepared to continue our military operations until this threat is eliminated, regardless of Galactic Council approval. Admiral, Vortak replied carefully, your fleet's capabilities appear to extend far beyond what humanity has previously disclosed. Many of your weapons and technologies appear to violate multiple galactic treaties. Chen's expression didn't change. Prime Vortak. Those treaties were written by species that had never faced extinction. When humanity joined the Galactic Council, we agreed to abide by laws designed to maintain peace between civilized species. We never agreed to allow those same laws to prevent us from defending civilization itself. The implications of her words struck Vortak like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been building hidden military capabilities. They had been preparing for the possibility that galactic law itself might need to be suspended in the face of ultimate crisis. What are your intentions regarding Galactic Council authority? He asked. Our intentions are simple, Chen replied. We will eliminate the Shadow Fleet threat. Once that objective is achieved, we will be happy to discuss humanity's relationship with galactic civilization. Until then, we consider ourselves temporarily exempt from all treaties and restrictions that interfere with military necessity. As if to emphasize her point, the display behind her showed a new wave of human vessels emerging from jump points across the galaxy. These ships were larger than anything previously seen, their designs clearly optimized for warfare rather than diplomacy. Admiral, Vortak said quietly, are you declaring war on the Galactic Council? Chen's expression softened slightly. Prime Vortak, we're declaring war on extinction. The Shadow Fleet has capabilities and numbers far beyond what you've seen today. Our intelligence indicates they're merely the advance force of a much larger threat. The choice before us is simple. Abandon the restrictions that prevent effective defense, or watch galactic civilization fall to an enemy that recognizes no law but strength. The transmission ended, leaving Vortak alone with the most difficult decision in galactic history. Outside, human fleets were systematically destroying Shadow Fleet forces using technology that shouldn't exist, violating laws that had maintained peace for millennia. Yet their actions were saving lives and protecting worlds that the Galactic Council's own forces had been unable to defend. Sir, his aide reported, we're receiving casualty reports from the affected systems. Human intervention has reduced estimated casualties by over 80%. Several worlds that were expected to fall have successfully repelled their attackers. Vortak closed his ancient eyes, feeling the weight of countless civilizations pressing down upon him. The humans had been right about the threat. They had been right about the need for immediate action. And now they were proving right about the inadequacy of galactic law in the face of extinction. In the distance, explosions lit up the space. 3 weeks had passed since humanity's dramatic intervention, and the galaxy found itself facing a new reality that none had anticipated. The Shadow Fleet, which had threatened to destroy galactic civilization in a matter of days, had been systematically hunted down and eliminated by human forces operating with ruthless efficiency. Admiral Chen stood before the reassembled Galactic Council, but the chamber felt fundamentally different than it had before the crisis. Where once hundreds of species had debated and deliberated in careful order, now barely half the seats were occupied. Many representatives had been recalled to deal with the aftermath of Shadow Fleet attacks, while others had been replaced by military leaders rather than diplomats. The humans themselves had changed most dramatically of all. Gone were the modest delegations that had once sought approval for their proposals. In their place stood a full military command staff, their uniforms and bearing making it clear that humanity no longer considered itself subject to council authority. Council Prime Vortak, Chen began, her voice carrying across the chamber with absolute confidence. The immediate Shadow Fleet threat has been neutralized. Our fleets have tracked down and destroyed every enemy vessel we could locate. However, our investigation into their origins has revealed information that the Council needs to hear. Behind her, a massive holographic display activated, showing the galaxy from a perspective none of the assembled representatives had seen before. Instead of the familiar political boundaries and trade routes, this display revealed something far more disturbing. Dark lines stretched across the image like infection vectors, showing the true scope of Shadow Fleet infiltration. The Shadow Fleet was not an external threat, Chen continued. They were an internal parasite that had been growing within galactic civilization for over a century. Their technology, their tactics, their intelligence about our defenses, all of it came from within the galactic community itself. Shocked murmurs filled the chamber as representatives began to understand the implications. Representative Thymol leaned forward, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. Are you suggesting that one of our member species was responsible for the attacks? Not one species, Chen replied grimly. Multiple species, or rather corrupted elements within multiple species. The Shadow Fleet appears to have been a coalition of extremist factions that believed galactic civilization had become too diverse, too chaotic to survive. They sought to impose unity through destruction. The display shifted, showing detailed intelligence about Shadow Fleet operations. Hidden bases within Council territory, manufacturing facilities disguised as legitimate industries, and communication networks that had operated undetected for decades. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Our investigation revealed that these factions had been deliberately sabotaging Council responses to their attacks, Chen continued. Committee delays, bureaucratic obstacles, intelligence failures, all of it was orchestrated to prevent effective resistance. They wanted the Council to fail, so they could emerge as the only force capable of restoring order. Council Prime Vortak felt his ancient blood run cold. The paralysis that had gripped the Council during the crisis hadn't been incompetence or bureaucratic inertia. It had been deliberate sabotage by enemies operating from within their own government. How long have you known about this? He asked quietly. Our intelligence services began detecting anomalies 18 months ago, Chen admitted. We attempted to share our concerns through proper channels, but our reports were consistently buried in committee reviews or dismissed as insufficient evidence. After the seventh attempt to alert the Council was mysteriously delayed, we began conducting our own investigation. Representative Zethrak, whose homeworld had been saved by human intervention, spoke up from his position near the front of the chamber. Why didn't you simply present your evidence directly to the Council floor? Chen's expression darkened. Because we had reason to believe the conspiracy included individuals within the Council itself. We couldn't risk alerting the conspirators to our investigation before we had gathered sufficient evidence to expose them all. The implications sent a wave of paranoia through the assembled representatives. If Shadow Fleet sympathizers had been operating within the Council itself, then every delay, every bureaucratic obstacle, every failed response had potentially been an act of treason. The evidence we've gathered implicates individuals from 17 different species, Chen continued, and the holographic display began showing faces, names, and documentation. Some held positions within the Council bureaucracy. Others were military commanders who ensured their forces arrived too late to be effective. Several were intelligence officials who consistently underestimated the threat or misdirected resources. Among the faces that appeared, Vortak recognized several individuals he had worked with for decades. Trusted advisors, respected military leaders, diplomatic veterans who had helped shape galactic policy for generations. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. "What have you done with these individuals?" asked Representative Kravak, his warrior instincts making him suspicious of human justice. "Those we could locate have been detained by human military forces," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "We have detailed evidence of their crimes and are prepared to turn them over to appropriate authorities once the Council establishes a process for dealing with treason on this scale." The casual way she mentioned detaining galactic citizens sent another shock through the chamber. Humanity was acting with the authority of a galactic power, making unilateral decisions about justice and law enforcement. "On whose authority did you detain Council citizens?" demanded Representative Quillix, his tentacles writhing with agitation. Chen's response was delivered with cold precision. "On the authority of survival. When the Galactic Council proved incapable of defending its own citizens due to internal sabotage, humanity assumed responsibility for galactic security. We acted under the same emergency powers that any species would invoke to protect civilization itself." "And now?" asked Vortak. "The immediate crisis has passed. Will humanity return to Council authority?" For the first time since the crisis began, Chen smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "That depends entirely on whether the Galactic Council is prepared to make the changes necessary to prevent this situation from recurring." She gestured, and the holographic display shifted again, this time showing a document that made several representatives gasp in recognition. It was a new treaty, but unlike the careful diplomatic language usually employed in such documents, this one was written in stark, uncompromising terms. "The Terran Federation proposes the establishment of the Galactic Defense Authority," Chen announced, "a military organization with the power to act immediately against existential threats without requiring committee approval or diplomatic review. This authority would operate under emergency protocols designed to prioritize effectiveness over procedure." Representative Thaimal studied the document carefully. "This authority would have the power to override Council decisions in matters of galactic security." "In matters of galactic survival," Chen corrected. The Shadow Fleet crisis demonstrated that traditional diplomatic processes are inadequate when facing extinction-level threats. The choice before the Council is simple: adapt to reality, or continue operating under a system that nearly allowed civilization to fall. "And if we refuse?" asked Kravak bluntly. Chen's expression didn't change, but her answer sent a chill through every representative present. "Then humanity will continue operating under emergency authority until such time as a competent galactic government emerges." The threat was clear. Humanity wasn't asking permission to restructure galactic civilization. They were informing the Council of their intentions. The assembled representatives could choose to participate in the process, or they could find themselves excluded from decisions about their own future. "You're holding the entire galaxy hostage," accused Representative Quillix. "No," Chen replied firmly. "We're holding the entire galaxy safe. There's a difference." Over the following hours, the true scope of humanity's demands became clear. The proposed Galactic Defense Authority would have unprecedented powers, including the ability to conduct preemptive strikes, deploy restricted technologies, and override local sovereignty in the name of galactic security. More concerning still, humanity insisted that they would provide the majority of leadership positions within this new organization. "Why should we trust you with such authority?" asked Representative Zelos. "Your species has already demonstrated a willingness to violate galactic law when it suits your purposes." "Because," Chen replied, "we're the only species that was prepared for the Shadow Fleet threat. We're the only ones who detected the conspiracy within the Council. We're the only ones who took effective action when civilization was at stake. Most importantly, we're the only ones willing to make the difficult decisions that galactic survival requires." The debate continued for days, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. Across the galaxy, human fleets continued their patrol operations, their mere presence ensuring that no new threats could emerge undetected. Human technology continued to process vital communications and logistics that kept galactic civilization functioning. Human medical teams were treating casualties from the Shadow Fleet attacks, using advanced techniques that other species couldn't replicate. The sobering reality was that humanity had made itself indispensable to galactic civilization, and they had done so deliberately. Every service they had quietly provided over the past decades, every technology they had shared, every improvement they had made to galactic infrastructure had been part of a careful strategy to ensure their voice could never be ignored again. "We're not seeking to dominate the galaxy," Chen explained during one of the final negotiation sessions. "We're seeking to ensure that the galaxy can defend itself. The Shadow Fleet won't be the last existential threat we face. When the next crisis emerges, we need to be ready to act immediately rather than spending months in committee hearings." In the end, the Galactic Council voted to accept the Terran proposals, though the vote was closer than humanity might have preferred. The Galactic Defense Authority was established with Admiral Chen as its first Supreme Commander. Reporting to a council of representatives from major galactic powers, but with ultimate authority over matters of galactic security, the new organization immediately began implementing changes that would have been unthinkable just months before. Military response times were measured in hours rather than months. Intelligence sharing became mandatory rather than voluntary. Weapons restrictions were relaxed for species willing to accept oversight and training from human military advisors. Most significantly, the culture of galactic governance began to shift from deliberation toward action. The careful, methodical processes that had maintained peace for millennia were replaced by rapid decision-making protocols designed to address threats before they could escalate. Standing in his office overlooking the rebuilt council chamber, Council Prime Vortak reflected on the changes that had transformed their civilization. The humans had been right about almost everything: the nature of the threat, the inadequacy of traditional responses, and the need for radical reform. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that in saving galactic civilization, humanity had fundamentally altered it. The galaxy was safer now, more capable of defending itself against future threats. But it was also more militarized, more centralized, and more dependent on human leadership than ever before. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Admiral Chen's image appeared on his personal display, her expression professional but not unfriendly. "Prime Vortak," she said, "I wanted to personally thank you for your support during the transition. I know these changes haven't been easy for the Council to accept." "Admiral," he replied carefully, "I hope you understand that many species still have concerns about the concentration of power in human hands." Chen nodded. "I understand completely. Power without accountability leads to tyranny, regardless of species. That's why we've insisted on regular reviews and oversight committees. The Galactic Defense Authority must remain accountable to the people it serves. And if humanity ever decides that galactic oversight is no longer necessary," Chen's smile was genuine this time, "then I suppose the galaxy will have learned enough from us to defend itself without our help. That would be the best possible outcome." As the communication ended, Vortak found himself genuinely uncertain about the future. Humanity had demonstrated they could be trusted with power during a crisis, but history was full of species that had changed once they achieved dominance. Yet looking out at the rebuilt council chamber, where representatives now debated with urgency rather than endless procedure, he had to admit that the changes had been necessary. The galaxy was no longer the same peaceful federation that had existed for millennia. It was something new, something more capable of defending itself against the darkness that lurked beyond the edges of civilized space. Whether that transformation would ultimately prove beneficial or destructive would depend on choices yet to be made by both humans and the species they now protected. One thing was certain: the age of galactic complacency was over. Humanity had ensured that civilization would never again be caught unprepared for extinction. Whether that was salvation or conquest would be determined by future generations. But for now, the galaxy was safe, and that was enough. Round Kepler Prime as the last Shadow Fleet vessels retreated in the face of human firepower. For the first time in galactic history, humanity was operating beyond the bounds of law and diplomacy, and the results were undeniably effective. The question that haunted Vortok was simple. When this crisis ended, would humanity be willing to return to the restrictions and protocols they had abandoned? Or had the galaxy just witnessed the birth of a new power that would reshape civilization according to its own vision of survival? As alarms continued to sound and reports continued to arrive, one thing became clear to everyone in the command center. The galaxy would never be the same again, and humanity had ensured they would be the ones to decide what came next. GH proper channels, Chen continued. However, our warnings were deemed insufficiently verified and subject to the standard review process. We calculate that by the time your committees reached a conclusion, the Shadow Fleet would have already achieved their strategic objectives. Vortak's hands were shaking now as the magnitude of their failure became clear. The humans hadn't abandoned them out of arrogance or stubbornness. They had tried to save everyone and been ignored. Therefore, Chen concluded, humanity will be implementing our own response to this threat. We will not be bound by council protocols or restrictions in our efforts to preserve galactic civilization. We hope that when this crisis has passed, the Galactic Council will have learned to act with the urgency that existential threats demand. The message ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside, the galaxy was under attack by an enemy they had failed to take seriously, and the one species that had tried to warn them was now operating beyond their authority or control. Representative Zethrak looked around at his colleagues and saw his own fears reflected in their faces. For the first time in galactic history, humanity was truly on their own. And perhaps more terrifyingly, the rest of the galaxy might soon discover just how much they had depended on the species they had just lost.